can be used to make animations, visual effects, game assets, or practically anything 3D. And best of all, it's 100% free and it always will be. If you've never used it before but you want to learn it, well, then you're in the right place. This is a tutorial for complete beginners. I've been using Blender for 20 years, so I'm going to show you how to use all of its core features. And by the end, you'll finish with not only the confidence to start your own projects, but with your very own donut animation. And I know this looks complex, but I promise you it's achievable for a complete beginner. And I say that with confidence because many already have. This is actually the 4th version of this tutorial. I made the first donut tutorial back in 2016, and I've been remaking it every few years to keep up with Blender's development. In that time, millions of people, just like yourself, have gone from splash screen to close it, and welcome to the wonderful world of 3D. First tip, do not get overwhelmed. If you go clicking around, you might find lots of buttons and some of them with very scary names, and it can all get very overwhelming very quickly. The thing you need to know is Blender can do a lot of things, which means it has a lot of tools, but you don't need to know every tool in order to do what you want to do. If you're familiar with the 80-20 rule, there's really only 20% of Blender's features that you end up using 80% of the time. And that's what I'm planning to teach you in this tutorial series. So stay with me and you should be fine. We'll start making the donut in the next video. In this one, we're just going to look at the interface and I'm going to show you some of the basic navigation. So for starters, this view, this window right here is your 3D viewport, and it's where you'll spend probably 90% of your time because it is the 3D world. So you can see that we have 3 objects here. We've got a camera, we've got a cube, and we've got a lamp. And when we click on it, you can see it's selected because it has the yellow outline. So let's delete the default cube, of course, and replace it with something else. So we could do that by going up to the Add menu up here, or by remembering the hotkey, which is Shift A. So Shift A for Add. So usually the one you're looking for is underneath Mesh. So these are called your primitives, and it's what you use to start something when you're looking to make an object. Like if you're going to make a chair, you might start with a cylinder as the chair leg and then build out from there. But the one I'm sure you're all very curious, you want to click it, it's the monkey. So let's just click the monkey. Why does Blender have a monkey? Well, fun fact, every 3D software has its own little random complex object because it's useful to test things like shaders or complexities of scenes. So 3ds Max has the Utah teapot, Houdini has the toy, and I think pig's head. Blender has the monkey, and it's actually called the Suzanne monkey head, which you can see in the top left there, named after the orangutan from the film Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back. Random piece of trivia. So let's get a better look at it. And to that we need to orbit, which you can do by on your mouse there, your scroll wheel, that is called your middle mouse button. If you push that in and then drag around, that is now orbiting. Now, for my laptop users, you've just panicked because you realize you don't have a mouse. How are you going to orbit around? First of all, probably a good idea to get a mouse for 3D work. It will come in handy. But in a pinch, you can get by without it just by up here in the top right-hand corner, this little gray circle, anywhere in the gray section. If you just left-click, drag on that, that will do the exact same thing. Or if you want, you can go to Edit Preferences, and then underneath Input, there's Emulate 3-button mouse. And that means that if you hold down Alt and then left-click, drag, that will do the exact same thing. Also, whilst you are in user preferences, you might want to go to interface and you've got resolution scale. If you're on a it will come in handy, but in a pinch you can get by without it just by up here in the top right hand corner, this little gray circle, anywhere in the gray section. If you just left click, drag on that, that will do the exact same thing. Or if you want, you can go to Edit Preferences, and then underneath Input, there's Emulate 3-button mouse. And that means that if you hold down Alt and then left-click drag, that will do the exact same thing. Also, whilst you are in User Preferences, you might want to go to Interface, and you've got Resolution Scale. If you're on a 4K monitor, you might find that your menus and buttons are really small and you kind of have to like squint in to see it. So personally, I like to keep my 4K monitor around about 1.5, but since this is a tutorial, I'll make it nice and big so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so that's orbiting around with the middle mouse button. If we want to zoom in, we can do that just by scrolling in and out. We could also do it by going up to the magnifying glass tool there, and then just left-click dragging and then moving the mouse back and forth. That does the same thing. Or you could hold down Control and then middle mouse button, and that will do a smooth zoom as well. Okay, so one thing you might notice looking at this is that it's not very pretty, right? It's just kind of got this flat, bland gray lighting over everything. And that's because this state right now is called viewport shading. And it's kind of a lightweight, optimized way to view the scene just as you're building it. But if you want to create a final pretty image, that's called rendering. And you can actually switch into rendered mode by going up here into the top right-hand corner. You can see we're currently in the viewport shading mode. If we go 2 across, you should see rendered view mode. So if we click that, up here into the top right-hand corner, you can see we're currently in the viewport shading mode. If we go 2 across, you should see rendered view mode. So if we click that, your computer might stall for a quick second whilst it loads it in, but you can see it's now different. We have directional light. We have shadow cast across the monkey. So it's now currently being lit by this lamp up here. So if I wanted to, zoom in on that lamp there and just kind of like move it around, you can see it's kind of hard to focus on. Like it's always exactly not in the right view. And that's because we are centered on our monkey right now. We need to change the focus. We need to pan to something else. So we could do that one of 2 ways. One, if you're on a laptop, you could use the little move tool there. That will do that. Or everyone else, shift middle mouse click, drag, that will do the same thing. So middle mouse is for orbiting, shift middle mouse is for pan to change your view to something else. Okay, so I want to move my light because it's too moody. I want to be able to see the monkey's face there. So to move an object, you could do it one of 2 ways. One, you could go over to the left-hand corner here and you've got the move tool. When you click that, you can see that the selected object, the lamp, has this gizmo, it's called, with these axes on it. And if I just clicked and dragged on any of those arrows there, you can see I can move it along any of those axes. I could also just click on that white circle there, and that will just freehand drag it depending on my view. But it's kind of tedious. Every time you want to move something, you have to like go to that tool and then find the arrows and yada yada. So actually most people in Blender prefer to use the hotkeys. So we just keep it in the default selection state here. And instead remember the hotkey, which is G for grab. Now I've just tapped the key and you'll notice as I move my cursor that it's now attached to my cursor. My cursor isn't even actually close to it. In fact, my cursor could be on the other side of the screen and I could tap G and it will move it. And at first this is kind of awkward. You're like, why is it working this way? But once you get used to it, you realize it's actually handy because you don't have to spend all this time like navigating your cursor to something just so that you can move it. Your cursor could be over here and then just tap it and you're moving it. So whilst you're in this move state, if you want to cancel a movement, you could do it one of two ways. You could just hit escape or you could right click. Then if you want to confirm a movement, like say I want to move my lamp here and I like the movement, I could just do a single left click. So again, if I want to cancel something, just right click. If I want to confirm the movement, left click. But let's say I wanted to move it along an axis, like, I like these arrows here and I want to be able to move it on just a specific axis. Well, I can do that whilst I'm in that grab state as well. So after I've hit the G key to grab it, I can then tap the letter of the axis that I want to move it on. So if you don't know, in the real world and in the 3D software, there are 3 axes because there's 3 dimensions. There's the X axis, which I can move it by hitting the X key, the Y axis to move it back and forth along the Y axis with the Y key, or the Z axis to move it up and down on the Z axis. So you can remember those letters, the X, Y, and Z, or the method that I actually prefer to use is whilst you're in that G state, if you just hold down the middle mouse button and then pull out, you can see you get this like gray line that pulls out from the center. And then if you just drag out and move around, it will snap it to the nearest axis, which again is maybe an odd way to work, but it's actually really handy because it means you don't have to think of the letter and locate it on your keyboard. I can just tap G to move it and then middle mouse drag out and then just find that exact axis that I'm looking for. And so it's very fast to just quickly move the lamp exactly where I want it. By the way, if you're finding it hard to remember all of the keyboard shortcuts that I've mentioned, I've actually put together a PDF, a cheat sheet of Blender's most common hotkeys, and you can download that by clicking the link in the description, so you could print it out or you could just have it on a separate monitor while you work. Also, if you are from a another 3D software package, you might notice that Blender's hotkeys are different than what you are used to. So if you actually go to preferences, just for those people that are from other softwares, if you change the key map to industry compatible, you'll find that these shortcuts are probably more in line with what you remember from other software. I'll also put a link to a cheat sheet that is just for the industry compatible key maps that somebody else put together. I've got nothing to do with it, but I'll put that link there so you can check it out as well. For the rest of this tutorial series, I'm going to use Blender's hotkeys. Just keep that in mind. Now let's say as I am moving around here, I'm like, oh, this looks really good. I've got some nice Rembrandt lighting across the monkey's face. I want to take a photo. I want to take a nice pretty image of this and post it on socials for clout, right? Well, I could take a screenshot of it, but that would be silly because it's got all these lines all over. It's all noisy, right? We don't like it. The way you take a photo, a pretty image in Blender, is to do a render. So you could do that one of two ways, by going up to render and hitting render image, or remembering the hotkey, which says next to it F12. So when you do that, a little window will pop up. It will use your CPU or GPU, depending on which renderer you've got active, and it will render out a pretty image. And from here, you could go image and then save as, and that'll save it as a PNG or whatever, wherever you want to save it. But you might notice looking at this that this is actually a different view than what we have here, right? So here I've got a nice view of the monkey's face, but up there is a different view. And the reason for that is when you do a render, it's not rendering from the view that you're looking at currently. It's always going to render from the point of view of the camera. So this is our camera over here, and it's looking from this angle. And we can actually look through the camera by just clicking the little camera icon there, or by remembering the hotkey, which is number pad 0. So how do we move the camera? Well, Blender's a little awkward, maybe a little different to other software packages, but you're supposed to like hit G to move it, and then like middle mouse to zoom in and out. And then if you want to like move it along an axis, I guess G and then X. You could do that, but actually what a lot of users prefer, especially those from other software packages, is if you've got your camera selected, which by the way, I haven't mentioned this, but up here, this is your outliner. It's kind of an inventory of every item that you've got in your scene. Okay, so with the camera there selected, if I hit N, N is to bring up the properties, N for properties for whatever reason, and then go to view. There's a little box there that just says lock to camera to view. So now with that active, if I just use the same keyboard shortcuts as before, middle mouse button to orbit around, shift middle mouse to drag it, you can see that the camera is moving with it. So essentially the view, I can set it up exactly as I want, then hit N again, and then I can disable that. And then now as I pull out, you can see that the camera will stay exactly where it was, and I could do a lovely, pretty render. But this is too simple. If we post this on the internet, people are bound to make fun of us. Imagine that. Well, we could give it some color, right? So with our monkey head selected, we can go over to here to the properties. So this properties section is where you might spend the other I don't know, another 8 5 to 8%. I don't know, getting too exact there. You might spend another 5% of your time in this section, but it's where all of the properties for things are in Blender. So for example, you've got like the render properties, like the size of the image that you're saving something as is defined there. And some of these properties will stay here no matter what is selected, but others are selection dependent. So you can see actually if I click the camera there, you can see I get a little camera tab at the bottom there. But if I select my monkey, you'll see the camera tab disappears, but instead I have some other ones that appear. So one that we might want to change is underneath material, and this will enable us to add a material, change the color to something else, essentially. So underneath here where it's got new, I'm just going to hit new. And then you've got a bunch of options, very confusing. Ooh, IOR, subsurface. Again, don't worry about it. We'll get to all of that later on. The one that defines the color is the base color. So if I do a single left click on that white box there, I can then change this color to whatever I want. I could make it an odd, creepy, skin-toned monkey head, right? Like that. And do a render. Okay, so hey, all right, it's better, but still it's too simple. I think people will think we haven't put enough effort into this masterpiece. So let's add another object. Let's give the monkey a hat. So if we want to add another object, how do we do it? Well, we could go to the add menu, like I mentioned before, or the hotkey Shift A. So what sort of hat do we want to add? We could do a boxy hat. Let's do a party hat with a cone. So once we've added that object, you can see it's just plopped it straight in the center, intersecting our monkey. So we need to move it. We can move it and we could grab it with the G key. So it's now moving it just on our cursor there. I don't want to move it just freehand though, because I like the position, but I just want to move it up. So I'm going to hit Z to move it along the Z axis. Right, I like it there. So once I like the placement, I'm just going to do a single left click. Okay, great. But too big. See, we need to learn another tool, which is scale. So we could go to the scale tool there, and then we get this familiar little axes there. But again, most people prefer to remember the hotkey, which for scale is just S. So S to scale. So resizing that. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's move it down again. So G and Z. Okay. All right, but yeah, let's say we want to make it a little taller. Okay, so we could scale it along just the Z axis. So S and then Z, whoops, S, Z, there we go. And it's now making it a tall party hat. Scale it down. There we go. Ha, look at that. Be a very bland party if it's gray though. So let's give it another material, an exciting color, a vibrant aqua color. Why not? Give that a render by hitting F12. Okay. Camera is in the wrong position, so let's go to camera view mode with number pad 0. I'm going to select my camera, and rather than dabbling with that little thing, thing I had before. I'm going to hit G and then middle mouse, just tap it once. As I said, it's a little awkward. Blender's the way it handles with the camera. But anyway, just move that out, and then I got to rotate it. All right, so I'm going to rotate. So with the camera selected, tap R, then middle mouse, and it's now kind of like... freehand rotating around. So I'll just move it up slightly. There we go. Okay. This is just a fool around session, so don't worry if you're making mistakes. We'll get to actual practical building stuff in the next part. I'm just trying to find ways to throw in these like fundamental tools. Rotate, right? The monkey's head is just, he needs to look dead on at the camera, and currently he's off. What an excuse to use the rotate tool. So you could enable the rotate tool, right? The familiar axes there. You could click and rotate it around like that. Again, most people prefer to remember the hotkey, which is R to rotate, right? So it's now just freehand rotating on my cursor. Remember the axes, as I mentioned before, can be used for any mode. So the X axis will rotate it back and forth. The Y axis, tilt it, or Z, there we go, to turn it towards the camera. Just a little bit, right? And there you go, F12. And we've done it. Let's save it. Let's upload it to ArtStation and then just wait for the recruiters, essentially. All right, let's start a new scene so that we can get ready for part 2, where we're gonna actually start building our donut and learning some of the more core features of Blender. So click here and I will see you in part 2. Now we know how Blender functions, let's start building that. That donut. So as before, let's well, first of all, just to repeat, make sure you are working with a new scene, completely new scene. Don't want any remaining monkey heads lying around. Let's begin fresh slate, and let's delete our default cube just with the delete key, and let's replace it with a new object. You might remember the hotkey for that is Shift A. And as I mentioned before, you usually want what is underneath mesh because these are your primitives. So we want to start with something that most resembles what it is we're building. And if it was a house, you might start with a cube. If it was a vase, you might start with a cylinder. In our case, we want the donut-shaped one, although mathematicians call it a torus for some reason. So let's add that. Now, if I zoom in by scrolling up, we can see we have something resembling a donut. It looks like a pretty weak looking donut, you know, very flimsy. Looks like the donut before it's cooked, when they just drop it into the vat and it's just this little wispy thing. So immediately after you do some actions in Blender, you have options to change it. And the options are hidden down here in the bottom left-hand corner. You see a little box. And if you click that box, you see options. And look, we can change the dimensions of our torus. The donut before it's cooked, when they just drop it into the vat and it's just this little wispy thing. So immediately after you do some actions in Blender, you have options to change it. And the options are hidden down here in the bottom left-hand corner. You see a little box. And if you click that box, you see options. And look, we can change the dimensions of our torus. Now, something to note is that these options in Blender only appear immediately after you have done that action. If you do another action, like say deselect your torus by mistake, it's gone, right? Because Blender has assumed you have moved on. You've accepted the state of your donut, and this is the one you want, right? Now, if you haven't done anything drastic or changed this object in some severe way, you can temporarily bring it back by hitting F9. I never actually remember that hotkey. I just remember that immediately after I have added an object, if I want to tweak it, now's my chance before I move on to something else. Okay, so we could change, the size of it here. We can also change the resolution. I'll use the term resolution loosely. To make it higher or lower fidelity. And a mistake that a lot of beginners make, and I say this because this was the exact mistake I made way back in 2003 when I started learning Blender, is they go, well, I need a realistic looking donut, so I guess I need to go really high resolution. I remember my first project, one of my first projects was for a high school film project, and I wanted to have a close-up of a face. Didn't realize faces were going to be difficult, but I went really high poly, and then it was just an absolute nightmare to work with. So the reason you don't want this is that, for starters, things that are high poly are very slow to render, and they're very hard to work with if you want to tweak the shape of it. But also, as you learn and you grow with 3D, you'll discover that it is a lot easier to add resolution to something later on, but it's very difficult to take it away if you've already built it into it and you don't need it. So, long way to say, what we actually want is to have as few polys, these are called polys, as you can get away with. So I'm going to go with 32 major and 12 minor. And don't worry that it looks all jagged, because we will fix that in a moment. Now, the major and minor, this is really up to you, but I find that something that looks it's kind of chunky, like a fat donut, just looks really delicious. So I'm going with something around about this size, okay? And once I'm happy with this, once I'm ready to click off, I click off, the options are gone, and this is it. This is the donut that I am now working with. So how do we make this look higher resolution, less jagged? Well, one way is to use smooth shading. So if you right click with your object selected, go to Shade Smooth. And look at that, this is immediately better. Without getting too technical, this is kind of a fakery. It's sort of like the shader is telling the renderer that this is a really high poly dense mesh when it really isn't. It's just basically kind of like averaging out faces, and anyway, it's very technical, but basically means it's not going to add anything to your render time, but it's going to look smoother. And so this is generally what you want for something that is smooth and organic looking, like we want. If you were rendering like architectural or like hard surfaces, like later on we're going to put this on a counter, then the object will obviously want to be flat. But in our case, we're just going to use Shade Smooth. But you might notice that looking at this, especially if you go side on, that you've got this sort of jagged shape around here, right? So the silhouette is really breaking that illusion that this is a high poly or a smooth looking donut. But thankfully, rather than adding all of that complex density into the mesh itself and then making it hard to remove later on, there's another way through modifiers. So if we go over here to our properties, right, this very confusing, lots of option looking properties, click on the wrench, and this is the section called modifiers. And this is one of those object dependent things. So if you've got your camera selected, you won't see it. So it's only when you've got actual meshes that you might see this modifier here. So it's much easier to explain if we just add one. So up here, add modifier, and you've got a range of options here that can do a whole number of things. The one that we're looking for is underneath generate, and it is called subdivision surface. And it is a really common modifier that you use all the time. In fact, it's so common, it's actually, you can just immediately add it to any object just by hitting Control 1. But don't do that because we've already got it, so there. Now, some of you might have just discovered that your donut has disappeared. If that is the case, you need to go to Edit, Preferences, and then underneath Viewport, where it's got Subdivision at the very bottom, Disable GPU Subdivision. That will then make the subdivision perform on your CPU instead of your GPU, which is maybe non-existent or not performing whatever. But disable that and it should appear. But if it's already working for you, don't disable it, keep it going because GPU will be faster. So what exactly is this doing? Well, it's a lot easier to explain if we look at the shade flat mode, because we're not being tricked by the smooth shading there. If I set this levels viewport to 0. This is our original mesh. This is before we add the subsurface essentially. When we increase this, you can see that it is adding resolution to our mesh. And the more I increase this viewport levels here, the finer and finer that detail becomes. So to explain it, because this is such a very, very common modifier, it's kind of important to understand how it's working. You can see that this is these squares here, these are called faces, by the way. And for each one of these faces here, as I add a level, you can see it's becoming 4 faces, right? And then now if I zoomed in on this one face here, if I do another level, that's now become 4 faces. And then if I zoom in again, it's now become 4 faces. So it's exponentially adding detail. And you might also know that it is smoothing it out as well. Like this jagged edge that we've got here, you can see now becomes smoother. So to quickly visualize that, if I just draw it, like imagine you've got like a 90-degree corner, right? Like this. If you add a subsurf modifier, what it's going to do is it's going to add a point here, right? Because this is the extra detail. It's also going to take that point there and it's going to average it out. It's going to average it out between these points. And it's going to create another one there, another one there. So you go then from having that really hard corner there to having something that looks a lot smoother. So it's going to take a point and it's also going to change it to make it look smoother, generally speaking. So there we go. So now as I increase this, you can see it's getting smoother and smoother. Now, the reason there are 2 options here, you've got levels viewport and levels render. So reminder, this gray area that we operate in is called our viewport. The render is the pretty version. So as an example, you can see if I just turned it off for the viewport, it looks very jagged. But then for my render, if I increase that to 3, if I do my render, which you can go up there and render image, or remember the hotkey F12, you can see that that donut is now smooth, but I go back and you can see it's jagged. So For the viewport, you want to generally keep it lightweight, and then the render time, that's where you want to get a really nice looking pretty image. So you want to often have 2 different levels. In our case though, I don't really think we need to go beyond 1, even for our final pretty image, because this with shade smoothing turned on is good enough. And we're going to be adding more to the scene later on, so we don't want to make it too complex. So this is actually pretty good. Okay, so we have a perfect donut, and that's the problem. It's too perfect. You could spend decades trying to develop a machine in the real world that made a donut this perfect, and you never would. This is so mathematically precise that the eye will always see this as looking fake. So that's actually a problem you learn pretty quickly in 3D, that things that are too perfect just look fake. So you have to spend time making things look misshapen and adding variation there like you see in the real world because your eye expects to see it. So how do we do that? How do we make this donut look a little more lumpy and interesting? I do that by changing the mesh itself. So this mode that we are in right now, where we can click on different objects, is called object mode. And I know that because in the top left-hand corner, you can see we are in object mode. But if I click the drop down, you can see I get a number of other options here. And these options, again, will change depending on the object you've got selected. If I've got a lamp, my little light there selected, you can see I've only got object mode. My camera, I've only got object mode. But a mesh will give you extra options here. So let's enter into edit mode. Ooh. Right, now you can see our object has become something that looks weird. It's got a bunch of little points on it with lines and very technical. Well, that's because this is actually what the mesh is made up of. These little points here, which you can click on just by selecting, are called your vertices. The singular term is called vertex. I never say that. I like to just call all of them vertices, regardless of whether it's one or two, just because you always get some comments that go, actually, it's called vertex if it is singular. Anyway, so these are called your vertices, and if you have two of them joined by a line, that is called an edge, and if you have four of them forming a face, then it's called a face. So with these, I can quickly change the shape of my object by using the same hotkeys as before, and if I want to move this, then I would simply tap G, right? And you can see it's now attached to my cursor, and then if I want to confirm its movement, I just do a single left click, and there it is. Now if I go back into object mode, like that, you can see that my mesh has changed, okay? And by the way, the hotkey for jumping in and out of object and edit mode is just tab, okay? So you can see it's just toggling between those two modes because it's so common that you want to just quickly change things that it's just easily accessible by that. Now, this is okay, right? But you can see it's got like some artifacting. It's not the greatest lump, right? So how do we make it look a little more natural? Well, I mean, you could, you move one, drag it out, okay, click, and then I move, the next one next to it, right? I'll move that out, and then I'll move this one out a little bit, and then I move this one out. And it's like, okay, well now I've got the thing, but it took me like 5 actions. Ridiculous, right? No one wants to do that. No one's got time for that. Thankfully, there is a tool in Blender just for this, and it's called proportional editing, and you can enable it up there in your toolbar. So if you enable that, now if I something I cannot see, where are they coming from? Where are we going? I wanna follow you. Hit G and I move it out, you will see I get a little ring around my cursor there, and that is now changing the mesh around it. Now, a lot of people in my previous tutorials were like, I don't see what's going on. You have to have something selected first, and then when you hit G, you will see that little circle of influence. Okay, now this circle of influence, if I scroll up, you can see it's shrinking its circle of influence. And if I scroll down, it is expanding its influence. So it's only going to affect what is in that ring there, okay? If you are on, if you don't have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can also change the influence by using page up and page down. And if you don't have page up or page down because you're on a Mac keyboard, then what you would have to do is go to key map and then change your page up and page down to something else, just so that you could get around that. But guys, you got to get a mouse. Get a mouse with a scroll wheel. I think they're, I don't know, 50 cents or just in the nearest landfill somewhere. Get a mouse because it's going to make your life in 3D a lot easier. Okay, so with this, I can now make quick work of lumpy shapes, okay? So I just drag that out. Okay, I've got a little lumpy shape there. Maybe I go down here and I pull this up just by hitting G, moving it up. Okay, so already this is looking a little more natural, right? Because even if we were making a stylized world for a Pixar movie or something like that, you can't have just a spherical looking donut, sorry, spherical, round looking circular donut, because it just, your eye will see it as fake. So very quickly, I'm able to add a little bit of variation to the donut, just all around it, just a little bit over here. And you can see that I am just changing my circle of influence depending on what size of a lump I want to make. So I just want to make like a little bit that sticks out. I can make a small circle just by scrolling up like that. And you just want to do that until you get something that looks a little more natural. I might want to make the inner part as well. We just drag that in with a smaller circle, and that's pretty good. Let's just have a look from the top. I might actually just drag that out and make it a little bit more like that. But there you go. That's pretty good for a donut. It's still kind of simple. It's not too detailed, but it's got just enough variation in it that it's more interesting to look at. Oh, one more thing I forgot to mention. Go back into edit mode with tab. Donuts, when they're sitting in the little vat thing, right? They're only like half submerged, so then they have to be flipped. But it means that the bit that's nearest to the surface is getting less heat. So essentially what I'm saying is the bit that's around the donut, the circumference of it is usually a little bit flatter. So donuts aren't like perfectly round all the way around. They're usually a little bit flatter. So what I want to do is I want to select these vertices along here, and then I want to shrink them. Now I could go around one by one like this, which is actually what I used to do when I was learning Blender pre-YouTube days, and there was no tutorials. I would do this if I wanted to select this. Silly, because there's a function, a tool for that, and it is edge select. So if you hold down Alt on your keyboard and then do a single left click on not the points, but on the edge, right, this little line here, you can see it's selected all the way around. So it's anything that's connected along that line is now selected. So if I want to shrink this, right, what would I do? Well, I mean, yeah, you could like move it around, right? We want to shrink it. We want to change the scale of it. So we would use the hotkey S for scale. So S, and I'm going to scale that in. And I actually don't want proportional editing. So I'm going to turn that off and now scale in and just make it a little bit flatter. And there you go. See, it just feels a little bit more natural, doesn't it? Looks a little bit closer to what a donut looks like. And by the way, don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like this, like your lump is a little bit off. Like some people get a little bit too precious with the tutorial. I gotta match exactly everything I do. Like I'm just working on the fly as well. So just make what you think looks good. Maybe you think this is not misshapen enough and you wanna add more, go for it, because it might actually turn out better than what mine is. Now, before we move to the next part, how to save. Blender, very, very easy. You just go save as, and you just get one file. It's called .blend. Very literal file extension, really pushing the limits of what a file extension can be. That's almost a word, Blender. Anyway, .blend, and that's it. And then next time you open it up, it's exactly like it. It's not like ZBrush where you got like 4 or 5 different ways to save a project or an object or a tool or a... Hate ZBrush. Okay, that's how you save. Now, also, finally, I would say if you need help, because I know if you're stuck and then you leave a YouTube comment, you might not get a reply. If you want immediate help, I've got a Discord, so I'll put the link below. So there's like a little channel in there where you can just ask for specific donut help. So if you're having issues, feel free to jump into that. And also, guys, don't beat yourself up. Like 3D is definitely has like a steep-ish learning curve. So you're in that steep slope right now, and it's really common. Like a lot of this stuff is very foreign. 3D is very unique. It's very different to a lot of 2D tools. But don't give up. Like it's definitely achievable to learn and self-learn at home. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to pay for a tutor. It's really easy to get help online nowadays. So do make use of that Discord. Post comments as well in the YouTube comments if you want to. But I hope you stay with it. So if you're ready to jump to the next part after you've saved your blend file, go ahead.
fall.